Oh my goodness, we're at 109 degrees Celsius on here. M1 Max versus M2 Max. It's not really that big of an update, right? Well, I think you're gonna be surprised because today we're gonna compare everything from some benchmarks, real world tests. We're gonna look at the thermals and see how hot this powerful chip gets. And we're also gonna look at battery life because when you have this many cores, you can suck some power. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, starting out, both these systems are at 100% battery life. And I'm gonna unplug them right now because we love to see these realistic real world battery tests, not just what the manufacturers claim. Now, I do have them in high power mode because we wanna get the best performance, but in the future, I'm gonna test out the low power mode and see just how good these extra new efficiency cores are. Now, here are the full specs of the machines. They're priced exactly the same with the same amount of RAM and SSD space, but of course, you can get the M1 Max version for quite a bit off, up to $400 or $500 less. So we'll see if you should just save the money and get the older one. Now, one downside is the HDMI port because the M2 Max version can support up to 8K 60 or 4K 240 Hz compared to 4K 60, so it's a lot more future-proof. And with that, the M2 Max MacBook has Bluetooth 5.3 and Wi-Fi 6E. Now, I upgraded my router and my internet to test out how much of a difference does it make, and I was shocked when I went from 705 megabit per second to 1099. And get this, that's not even using Wi-Fi 6E. That's using Wi-Fi 6 on the new one. And I tested both. So if you guys want to see the full breakdown and how much of a benefit you get and also some downsides, make sure you guys are subscribed. Now with that, I also want to let you guys know about our giveaway that we're doing of a 14-inch MacBook Pro and a Mac Mini. Tomorrow, we are going to be announcing the winners in a video. So make sure you guys comment down below. All you need to do is comment, subscribe, and enable notifications for a chance to win. Now, most other things with these laptops are the same. We have the same display with that 1600 nits, same design, same weight. But one thing that reviewers didn't mention is that Apple did change up the speakers, and probably for the worse. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Now, I don't know if our $850 mic setup can pass this through YouTube's compression, but the old MacBook actually has brighter highs and a little bit more volume than the new M2 Pro. And Apple's doing this across all their MacBooks, the 14-inch, the new M2, the 13-inch MacBook Pro. They're toning it down, and I don't know why, because I prefer the old one. Now, another thing that we have noticed with the 14-inch model is that the heatsink has actually gotten smaller at the same time as we have more cores. So let's go ahead and open these up and take a look inside here. And as you guys can see, the actual heat block, once again, just like the 14-inch, is a lot smaller. This on the side here is literally just a little plastic sticker over a little metal frame, but the actual block is this top section. So it is probably even half the size here? It looks like even an even bigger difference comparing the 14-inch M1 Pro to the M2 Pro. That is crazy. Now, we will see if Apple changed anything with the RPMs of the fans and the thermal performance. Does this get a lot hotter and does it thermal throttle? We'll see in a second. But another thing we noticed is that the actual SSD memory module chips here, they are a lot larger on the M1 Pro, smaller on the M2 Pro. Now, both these are 1 terabyte, so maybe they're using a different manufacturer or something else has changed. Even the contact pads are a lot smaller, so we will do an SSD test. Now, before we compare the SSD speeds, I've got to talk about the best MagSafe iPhone case I've ever seen, the Magic Stand case from our partner CaseQ. Not only is it surprisingly slim and durable, but it comes with a very strong 48 magnet MagSafe ring that actually doubles as a stand. just pull out the ring to use it as a finger grip or a stand for watching videos at any angle between 40 and 120 degrees. And the best part is that it folds completely flush with the case, so you can still use it with your MagSafe chargers and accessories. So use the link below to get a special discount today. And now let's go ahead and hit run. We're using Amorphous Disk Mark, which gives you a lot more information. And right at the get-go, check this out, our read speed is actually faster on the old one with those larger chips. But as far as the write speed, the M2 Max actually wins. Now here is the full comparison, and other than that first read speed, the M2's SSDs win, especially if we look at like the large block randoms. Now, one thing I will say, if you are buying a 512 gigabyte model, in that case, just don't do it, because you're gonna save a little bit of money, but that is half the speed of the 1 terabyte M2, whereas the previous M1 Max laptops, the performance didn't really change. So it's definitely not worth saving that $200 for 512. Do the 3500 one if you're buying that spec, it's well worth it. Now, another thing that reviewers didn't mention is that there is a difference in terms of the webcams. This is the M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro's 1080p webcam and microphone, and while it does look good, this M2 Max MacBook Pro's looks better. It is sharper, has more detail, the colors are a little bit better, and I think it looks more pleasing. And as far as the microphones, I can't hear myself right now, but you guys let me know if you notice any difference. And now let's get into the performance, and we notice something crazy. Our M1 Max is running at 3.2 gigahertz, just like the M1 Pro, but the M2 Max is running at 3.67, much higher, whereas the M2 Pro runs at 3.49 or so. So Apple is clocking the M2 Max in the 16-inch higher, and we'll see if it can maintain that speed when we run some more tests. Now, I'm personally curious, will the 14-inch M2 Max also get this higher clock speed? We will find out when we compare the 14-inch to the 16-inch, so make sure you guys have notifications enabled. And now I'm gonna run this test. All right, guys, look at this. We have a single core score of 2067. That's the highest we have ever seen. Definitely beats out the M2 Pro, as you guys can see right here, compared to 1,782. That is a difference of 16%. Whereas when we compared the M2 Pro versus M1 Pro, we had a 10% difference. So that is sweet, the extra clock speeds are helping. Now in terms of multi-core score, we have a difference of about 18%, not 20 like Apple advertised, but this multi-core score is the best we've ever seen for this machine with this Ventura update. I can't wait to see if it's gonna keep that up, but first, we're gonna run Speedometer 2.0 web browsing test. So many programs are online now, and so you need good performance. Both of these are good, but the M2 Max gets 441, 18% higher web browsing performance, which for some of you guys, that will matter. For example, web design with Figma, we have this project right here that our partners 500 Designs gave us, which are some of the best designers out there. And when I zoom in and out, everything is really, really smooth on the M1 Max. Let's check out the M2 Max. Also nice and smooth. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom into this section right here, see how long it takes for things to refresh. Super, super quick. Definitely seems quicker than the previous laptops we tested. And it's almost instant when I zoomed in there. Let's check out this one here. Definitely taking noticeably longer to refresh. This was maybe a second, even less, almost instant. This one about 2. So I don't know if it's the clock speed helping or what, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna export this website. We have 12 high resolution layers there. All right, we are done, and the M2 Max took 1 minute and 34 seconds compared to 1 minute and 55. So that's about 20% faster with the M2 Max. Now, we usually don't do this, but I have to figure this out. I have Cinebench open, and I'm gonna start out by running the single core test because I need to know about the 3.7 gigahertz. So let's go ahead and hit run. I have sudo acetop opened up right here, and look at that. That is very disappointing. Why is it doing that? What in the world? We have high power mode on. I'm running the single core test, and this thing is only running at 3.26 gigahertz. compared to 3.24, basically the same. That is crazy. Apple had to wire these differently. Now, Apple usually runs the M1 Pro and the M1 Max the same. They've always had the same clock speeds, but now I took out the 16-inch M2 Pro, not the Max. I wanted to double check, and here, single core is running at 3.5 gigahertz. M2 Pro, the M2 Max is running at 3.2, 3.3, oh, right there, I just hit 3.3, went back down. And Apple's using more of the efficiency cores. They set this up differently. It's running slower than it is actually rated, even the M2 Pro. So let me close this down. I have one more thing to try. Our friends from Tuna Belly made this endurance benchmark, and I can actually select just one core. So let's run it on both. Once again, we're getting 3.2 gigahertz, basically the same on both of these. That is crazy. The crazy thing is that this uses Apple's own terminal to load the cores, so the clock speed is by Apple's design. That is insane. Now, let's just go ahead and test out the full-on multi-core and see the performance that we get. Now, I'm not only gonna run a single test to see the regular performance, but we're gonna do the thermal throttling test as well, because I've been noticing that the M2 does run hotter pretty much all the time. Right out of the get-go, we could see that we are using about 6 watts more on the CPU. Of course, we have the extra 2 efficiency cores, and all of those are larger as well. We're running at 91 degrees compared to 83. That was quick, and we got a score of 13,888 for the M2 Max, slightly higher than the M2 Pro, and that's a difference of 21%, right in line with what Apple said. But just so you guys know, when you're running, we're seeing that 3.2 gigahertz, not 3.7 gigahertz that shows up. And it seems like the only place that really helps is for Geekbench to get some higher benchmark numbers. But if you guys know more about that, let us know. And now let's start the throttling test. I wonder if we're gonna maintain that 21% gain. We can see we're running at 35 watts compared to 2829, so a lot more power used, and the temperatures are also higher. And bam, we hit 100 degrees Celsius, 101 on the M2 Max. For some of these performance cores, 102, while the fans are just starting to turn on. That is crazy. While the M1 Max is running quite a bit cooler. We were looking at 95 degrees compared to 105. And it's crazy to see that the fans on the M1 Max are literally running as slow as they possibly can while still being on. So we definitely are seeing a thermal difference. So we're almost done here, and I'm gonna check out the heat with my thermal camera. We're seeing about 42 degrees Celsius on the M1 Max, and about 42 degrees Celsius as well on the M2 Max, but the heat's concentrated way more in the center there because we have that smaller heat block. Now, the other thing that's really standing out to me is that Apple has changed how they're doing stuff. I think it might be with Ventura, because the M1 Max now runs really hot after a while. We're running at, one of the cores is at 103 degrees Celsius, another one is at 102, 101. Over here, we're running very similarly. So they've tuned this to actually be quieter but run hotter. Now, the other thing I noticed is that even though the fans are running slower on the M1 Max model, I actually hear it more so. It has a higher kind of pitch sound. So I don't know if they changed up the fans or whatever, but they're running faster, but still quieter, which is good. Now, one really cool thing with TG Fan Pro is that you can set your own curve, so you can bypass Apple's. And if you want to run the fans more than 10, 20% or whatever is on this chart, and you want to keep your Mac cooler, you could do that. I'll leave a link to it down below. So here's our scores, and the difference is still 21%. So we had no issues with throttling, at least if you're maxing out the CPU. Now, it could be another story if we're doing a task that uses both the CPU and the GPU, and there are real world tasks that do this. Wow, we're running at 108 degrees Celsius now. I turned on 3D Mark as well to max out the graphics. Now here, we're also running hot, but it took a lot longer, and the fans are starting to kick on. But the CPU actually is downclocking on both of these ones right now. Let's wait for the fans to kick up. Apple's way too slow with this. Oh my goodness, we're at 109 degrees Celsius on here. The fans are ramping up loud. You guys could probably hear them, and these systems are running hot. Now, this one, the M1 Max, look, it's down to 100 degrees Celsius, 99, 98. But here, we're still running hot. You guys can see those crazy fluctuations in power, fluctuations in the frequency. Both of the fans are maxed out, but now the M2 Max sounds louder at full blast. The M2 Max is way more erratic, going crazy here, trying to maintain performance at its max compared to the M1 Max, a lot more chill. Maybe it just has to do with the extra cores, the smaller heatsink, but we'll see what we get for the final Cinebench score. We're almost done here, and the M1 Max is at 41, 41 there. And here, we're at 44. Yeah, right about 44 degrees, so definitely running hotter. All right, guys, we are done, and we have 9,161 for the M1 Max, definitely dropped there, and 11,036 for the M2 Max. That's a difference of 20%. So yes, it ran hotter, it ran louder, it was more erratic, but at the end of the day, even though I had to share power and thermals with graphics, the performance difference was still 20% what Apple claimed it was. So that is fine. But we do know if it had a better cooler or if it was 3 nanometer, in that case, the performance would maintain itself quite a bit better. And overall, I would say, yes, it will thermal throttle, but for most people, you don't have to worry about it. And now let's test out the graphics performance. It's a huge reason why people would want to buy the M2 Max with 38 cores compared to 32 for the M1 Max. And it looks like we have a difference of 32% in favor of the M2 Max. So that is right in line, but let's do something that is a little bit tougher because Geekbench doesn't scale the best. This is 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme gaming test in case you guys want to game on your Mac after work is done. We have 121 frames per second compared to 150.8. Now that seems like a pretty big difference. That's only about 25%, a little bit underwhelming. And now I'm testing GFXBench's Aztec Ruins 4K, and we have 139.5 FPS compared to 179.4. That's a difference of 29%, so we're definitely getting better scaling here. So 25 to 30% better. But now let's go ahead and test out some productivity tasks. For all the coders out there, we are gonna run our Xcode benchmark, and I wonder if we'll be able to see those higher frequencies. And that took 75 seconds compared to 90. That's 17% faster. Now the weird thing is that our M2 Pro 16-inch did that in 70 seconds. And I ran it another time just to make sure we're getting the same result. And running again and trying to look at clock speeds, it's just moving around a little bit. I don't know what's up with the tuning or what's going on, but I wish it was better. And now for those of you guys that work with music, we have our new Logic Pro benchmark turned on here, which has a lot of tracks, different plugins. And one thing we've noticed is that the M2 series of chips don't really perform better than the M1 when it comes to Logic. Looks like the M1 Max just got overloaded. The M2 Max is still going. So it looks like we reached 170 tracks on this one, 174 here. Very little difference, and either way, both of these are great. But if you're thinking about upgrading, I wouldn't do it. And now it's time to test out Blender 3D rendering using Metal. I have the classic BMW test opened up right here. Let's go ahead and render. Wow, the M2 Pro took 21.8 seconds compared to 40.18, almost twice as fast. And this is a simple test, so let's make it more difficult. This is the Party Tug demo file, and there are a lot of shaders and a lot of different lighting. It's a lot more difficult. As you guys can see, the GPUs are maxed out on both of them. And once again, the M2 Max is nearly twice as fast, 1 minute and 4 seconds compared to 1 minute and 50. Now, the graphics should only be 25-30% faster, but this has also got to do with the extra caching in the M2 Max chip, a lot larger buffers, and it definitely helps a lot in Blender. So if you're somebody that needs to have a laptop for Blender, this is definitely a reason to upgrade. Next, let's get into photo editing, and I wanna start out with Affinity Photo 2. It's very well optimized, and they have a built-in benchmark. And here, as far as the CPU performance increase for vector tasks, we're seeing about a 13% difference, not that big. And for graphics, the M2 Max is 24% more powerful, and it's slightly underwhelming. And this program is already so optimized, I think it's not really worth getting the M2 Max. Now, as far as Photoshop, I'm using the latest version that came out recently, and performance has improved, but that doesn't mean that you still don't have to wait. So I'm gonna be compiling an HDR image here. I'm gonna do this one by one to make sure I test it correctly. And it looks like the difference isn't big at all. We have 27 seconds compared to 32. Now, as far as Lightroom Classic, it has already been fast on the M1 Max. Now, this thing also uses a ton of GPU now and memory. It also uses the neural engine, so let's go ahead and select the sky and see which one is quicker. Wow, the M2 Max is about 3 seconds faster there. Almost half the time, that was impressive. Let's try that one more time for good measure. We have the shot of the hot air balloon that I took. Let me click the subject button here, see how long it takes to find it. Okay, that was very fast for both of them. And now I'm gonna export these 50 edited raw images. The M2 Max is definitely flying here, but the M1 Max really sped up there at the end, and we have a difference of just 6 seconds, 39 seconds compared to 45. So far it seems like for photo editing there's not much difference, but I have one more test I want to run. I have 10 50 megapixel raw images from my Sony A1, and I'm going to do a panorama here. They did a great job. This thing is super high resolution, and the M2 Max is 16% faster, 42 seconds compared to 50. Once again, not huge. So I will say it's not really worth spending a ton extra for the M2 Max. Let's go ahead and take a look at video editing. This is what we do most, and I'm hoping we have a big difference. Now, the M1 Max already does a really great job with standard 4K files, even with LUTs and film grain applied. So I wanna know, did Apple change the encoders with this new chip? Will it export faster for the kind of footage that most of us work with? And it looks like they're pretty much neck and neck, which is a disappointment. Now, I'm not gonna do a ton of video editing tests. I'm gonna do a separate video also looking at Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve and different codecs. If you guys wanna see that, make sure that you are subscribed. But after this easy one, we'll do a couple more tougher ones. Wow, 1 minute and 15 seconds for both of them. Incredibly fast at encoding, but we did not get any difference with the M2 Max. So unless you just have tons of layers, tons of effects, and you're maxing out your GPU, you're not gonna see a difference with standard footage. Now, the sweet thing about these machines is that they have ProRes decoders and encoders. In my Mac Pro, I spent $2 grand for a card just to decode ProRes. So what I'm gonna do is see, did they get any faster? Let's hit export there. And I wanna mention that the encoders were already super fast. We were typically limited by the graphics performance, and here I'm seeing a very slight difference. I was honestly expecting more. And we have 43 seconds compared to 46. That is crazy. I mean, both are fast, and Apple doesn't seem like they changed too much there. So we'll do one last test. This is 8K red raw footage, and it's very tough at full quality. As you guys can see, neither one is playing back perfectly, but it's close. And of course, you can go into better performance to make it play perfect. I'm gonna export it into a 4K file for the web. Let's get started. Now, this is only a 1 minute clip here because 5 minutes takes quite a long time here. But let's see if we notice any sort of a difference. And I really hope that we will. As you guys can see, the graphics are fully maxed out on both of these systems. But as far as the CPU, the M1 Max has to use more of the CPU, but not significantly so. This just has more performance, more cores, so it's using a little bit less. The M2 Max took 1 minute and 9 seconds compared to 1 minute and 22 roughly 15% faster. We're not limited by encoders or anything, it's just the raw performance. And once again, I really wish it was better than that, because CPU's 20% faster, GPU's 30, sometimes more than that percent faster, but that's not that good. Now I really want to test out the latest version of Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci is very well optimized. So if you guys want to see other codecs, denoising, Blackmagic Raw, and how those programs compare, I'll have a full detailed video for video editors, so make sure you guys have notifications enabled. Once again, comment below on this video and others if you want a chance to win a 14-inch MacBook Pro or the Mac Mini. We're gonna announce that on February 1st. And let me know, is it worth upgrading? Or if you're just trying to buy one, would you buy the M2 Max model? Or would you try to save some money on a discounted or used M1 Max model? We also have the YouTube shopping feature. You guys can click that and you guys can check out both of these machines. And now, I just wanna show you guys the battery life last. We have 12% on the M1 Max, and 6% on the M2 Max. Only a difference of 6%. You guys saw this uses a lot more power, but it also has the new efficiency cores that are much more powerful, so Apple can use those instead of performance cores more often. Plus, we have 4 instead of 2, which means that the easier tasks offset the big extra wattage that was used in these tough tests. In this video, we did a lot of tough tests. So overall, you're not really gonna suffer on battery life very much. And for easy usage, well, in that case, you will actually gain battery life. Now I wanna do a dedicated battery life comparison with low power mode, which just uses efficiency cores, and then some other tests. If you guys wanna see that, make sure you guys also are subscribed with that little button above. Go ahead and check out one of those great videos right over there. Let me know your thoughts below. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.